Welcome to today's Explainer. So, today we're literally cracking open a 2,000-year-old literary cold case. We're talking about a mystery that has completely baffled historians and philologists for centuries. You see, the modern hunt for answers really kicked off back in the late 18th century. That's when a German scholar named Friedrich started asking some, pretty uncomfortable questions about the very foundation of Western literature. And this is absolutely crucial, because if we don't actually know where these foundational epics came from, it completely changes how we understand the origins of modern storytelling itself.
It really all boils down to one monumental question. Did the greatest author in history actually exist? For centuries, people just accepted it as fact. They assumed a solitary genius created the Iliad and the Odyssey. The two works that effectively birthed the entire Western narrative tradition. But if we treat this like a CSI antiquity investigation and actually dig into the ancient sources, that assumption crumbles pretty quickly.
Which brings us to Section 1, the suspect, the man, the myth.
You know what's fascinating? It's just how incredibly confused the ancient Greeks themselves were about who their absolute greatest poet was. I mean, it's wild. If we ask when he was born, some sources confidently say 1100 BC, while the famous historian Herodotus claims 850 BC. Guys, that is a massive 250-year discrepancy. And his birthplace? Don't even get me started. Smyrna, Chios, Athens, Ithaca, literally everyone claimed him as their own native son. Some folks even genuinely believed he was the son of Telemachus. Think about that for a second. That would make him the literal grandson of his own character Odysseus. No way, right? It just goes to show that even in ancient times, nobody actually had a canonical biography of this guy.
Because they totally lacked concrete facts, ancient biographers basically just patched a myth together. Actually, even the name Homeros might just be a descriptive noun meaning blind person or hostage in certain ancient Greek dialects. And what about that famous, iconic image of the blind, wandering bard? Yeah, that was likely lifted straight out of his own poetry. In Book 8 of the Odyssey, there's a blind singer named Demodocus. Later biographers probably just assumed the author was writing about himself. They leaned heavily into this Greek cultural belief that physical blindness was sort of a trade-off for having literary genius gifted directly by the gods.
And while the ancient world couldn't agree on his birth to save their lives, they surprisingly rallied around a rather, undignified myth about his death. The legend goes that Homer encountered some young fishermen on the island of Ios who gave him a riddle. They said, "Those who we caught, we left behind, and those we did not catch, we bring." The great literary genius totally failed to realize the answer was lice. Yeah, lice. Distraught over failing this simple riddle, he supposedly slipped in the mud and suffered a fatal fall. It's a bizarre, kind of humorous end for the glorifier of great heroes, but it really proves just how much pure mythology shrouded this figure.
Let's move on to Section 2, the evidence. One author or many? So, stepping away from the mythology, we have to look at the actual evidence left at the crime scene, which, in this case, is the texts themselves. This brings us to what scholars officially call the Homeric Question. This is the intense, ongoing academic debate focusing on the true identity of Homer and the authorship and origins of the Iliad and the Odyssey. You basically have two camps fiercely working on this: the philologists who study the evolution of the language in the texts, and the archaeologists who are literally digging in the dirt to see if any of this poetry is based on historical reality.
Remember Friedrich from earlier? Well, in 1795, he pointed out something huge. There is absolutely no mention of writing anywhere in the epics themselves. Not once. So he proposed the compilation theory. Here's how it goes. Step 1, Homer was just a pseudonym for centuries of oral tradition. We're talking shorter songs memorized and performed by traveling singers. Step 2, as the Greek alphabet eventually evolved, scribes slowly started writing these songs down for posterity. And step 3, they were officially codified into their current, structured formats way later, in 6th century Athens under the tyrant Pisistratus. Under this theory, Homer isn't a single person at all. He's a long, collective process of cultural compilation.
But hey, don't count out a single genius author just yet. Fast forward to the 20th century, an American classicist Milman Parry pushes back hard. He said, let's look at iconic phrases like swift-footed Achilles, the wine-dark sea, or rosy-fingered dawn. Parry noticed these aren't just pretty poetic descriptions, they're actually metrical building blocks. The poet used these specific repeating formulas because they perfectly fit the incredibly complex syllable requirements of the poem's rhythm. It's like a giant puzzle. This highly specific structural design points heavily toward a single, brilliant, creative mind who composed orally using these rhythmic phrases as memory aids. It's honestly mind-blowing.
Next up, Section 3, the texts. A tale of two epics. Okay, so is it one author or centuries of oral tradition? Well, just to complicate things even further, let's place our two biggest pieces of evidence side by side. Look at the stark contrast between these two epics. The Iliad is this gritty, super grounded war story focusing on just 10 days of human conflict and the devastating, brutal rage of Achilles. But then you have the Odyssey, right? It takes place over a full 10 years and is absolutely packed with fantastical elements, witches turning men into pigs, one-eyed monsters, trips to the underworld, the whole shebang. Because the scopes, tones, and themes are so vastly different, a lot of scholars believe that even if there were real historical authors, there's just no way the exact same person wrote both of them.
That brings us to Section 4, the crime scene, digging up the truth.
Now, let's take our investigation out of the dusty library and into the physical dirt. For over 2 millennia, people honestly thought Troy was just a fairy tale. But then, in the 1870s, an archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann actually found it in modern-day Turkey. I mean, what a discovery. Modern excavations completely confirm it was a wealthy Bronze Age trading metropolis. And even more amazingly, independent Hittite and Egyptian historical sources confirm that Greek armies were indeed sailing across the Aegean to attack the region way back in the 13th century BC. So the city was real, and the conflict was absolutely real.
But, and this is a massive but, here's the crucial catch. The actual Bronze Age Trojan War happened around 1300 BC. After that, the entire Mycenaean civilization collapsed, leading to a long Greek Dark Age. Centuries later, somewhere between 1100 and 850 BC, our suspect, Homer, supposedly lives. And it's not until 650 BC that the epics are finally completed as written texts. To put that into perspective, we are talking about a story passed down through a Dark Age for hundreds of years before it was ever locked into writing. So, what we're looking at is not a historical record, it is a highly embellished cultural memory.
Because of that massive, centuries-long game of historical telephone, the texts are literally full of glitches. The author is trying to describe a long-lost Bronze Age world, so they include authentic details like massive figure-8 full-body shields and grand phallos tombs. But they accidentally mix in elements from their own contemporary Iron Age reality, like cremating the dead and using smaller, round shields. It's exactly what you'd expect from a historical fiction writer trying to reconstruct a world that existed 5 to 8 centuries before they were even born.
And while we successfully found Troy, locating Odysseus' home is still a frustratingly active archaeological cold case. We found Agamemnon's massive palace at Mycenae, sure, but the actual location of Homeric Ithaca is fiercely debated to this day. Is it modern-day Ithaca? Is it Lefkada? Or maybe the Peliki Peninsula? Archaeologist Thanasis Papadopoulos actually claims to have found Bronze Age ruins in northern Ithaca that he calls the School of Homer, suggesting it was Odysseus' actual palace. But I have to tell you, it is highly contested by the wider scientific community. Even if we do eventually find a palace, it doesn't prove Odysseus himself was a real guy, but it certainly shows how deeply this epic was rooted in real physical geography.
Which leads us to our final section, Section 5, the verdict, the enduring legend.
So we've examined our suspect, we've parsed the ancient texts, and we've literally dug up the crime scenes. When it comes to the Homeric question today, scholars generally fall into one of 3 leading theories. Number 1, Homer never existed, it's just a convenient mythical pseudonym for hundreds of years of collective oral Iron Age poetry. Number 2 is the traditionalist view. He was a real, singular, historical genius who orally composed both of these massive works using incredible metric formulas. Or number 3, kind of the middle ground, there were real historical authors, but because the tone and scope are so drastically different, the Iliad and the Odyssey were unequivocally written by different people.
And that brings us to our final question for this explainer. After weighing the sheer contradiction of his biography, the mind-blowing metrical brilliance of the verse, the massive gaps in the historical timeline, and the very real ruins of Troy, what is your verdict? Was Homer a historical genius, a mythical pseudonym, or maybe something in between? Which of these 3 theories do you actually believe? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.